Welcome back, my fellow patriots, to the Save Our Republic Daily video series. Today we're going to be talking about the American Freedom Curriculum. The last two episodes we discussed the challenges that we face as a country in connection with American history and civics, and how very disappointing, frustrating, and at times abysmal that education can be. I have mentioned in earlier episodes my book, America's Survival Guide, How to Stop America's Impending Suicide by Reclaiming Our Founding First Principles in History. I know that's a mouthful. And on page 148, I begin to discuss the American Freedom Curriculum. And again, I'm a former member of the State Board of Education. I've been employed with foundations that are associated with education in schools, and I've looked at standards from across the country. I really do have a sense for what's going wrong with our education system. And yesterday's episode dealt substantially with the fact that we teach our students American history chronologically across K through 12 schools, and that we wait for civics until the very end, and why that's a recipe for disaster. The idea of the American Freedom Curriculum is pretty simple, and I will use an analogy. If you want to learn French and you teach, call it, I don't know, the nouns in elementary school, and then you teach the verbs in middle school, and then you teach adjectives and other forms of sentence structure and grammar in high school, and you never return back to the nouns, you never return back to the verbs, your likelihood of being fluent when you graduate from high school is minuscule. And that the fact, and if they tested you on all the nouns and verbs that you learned several years ago when you graduated, the chances of your recollection would be, I think, pretty small. And that's what we've done with our education system. The way that you teach with history and civics, not with languages. What we do with languages is you begin with the basics, and then you come back and you build up on what you've learned the year before, and you come back and you build on what you've learned the year before that, and you continue to scaffold what you've learned so that by the time you graduate, you have fluency. And that's what we need. We need American history and civics fluency. We need to be fluent in what happened in the founding era, what our Constitution says, what happened in the Civil War, what happened in the civil rights struggles, and what's going on today. And so to be fluent, what you really do is, or literate, or whatever term you want to use, competent, proficient, we should teach the foundations in elementary school and continue to build on them and circle back to what you've learned the year before and build up on your level. So I call this, think of it as a spiral staircase. And at the beginning, at the bottom, is the pre-colonial era, the American Revolution, Constitutional Convention. And then you might learn that in one grade. And then the next grade you go to the next set of, the antebellum era, the Civil War, the Reconstruction, and then you circle back to modern history. And then you return the next year to the American Revolution, the founding era, the Constitution, so that you're now, and I would say that you start in kindergarten with some very, very basic concepts. And then you, in first grade and second grade, and then in third grade, you're coming back to the Constitution at a little bit stronger, more elevated level. And then you continue so that every year we're teaching our students the most important thing, which is our history and our civics, so that, in elementary school, they can start reciting parts of the Declaration of Independence or parts of the Constitution. And they don't have to learn the whole thing by rote, but I will say that there are children that have done that historically over the course of our history. And then in middle school, really have deep dives into what this means. And so that by the time they're in high school, all this is second nature to them. And then they can really start having debates and engaged, they can start writing papers and do some serious research and some projects and really become competent and fluent in American history and civics, so that when they graduate, they know what they can do and how to affect the system and what the system is when they're voting, when they're in the military, or even just as a general citizen. Even if they never go into college, they have that foundation. Public education was defined and created for really two reasons. The first reason was to allow people to be educated so that they could read Scripture and be saved. Their souls could be saved. The second reason is that they could learn American history and civics so they could be informed citizens when they went out into the world. And some of that was to, for immigrants and others, that they would understand the system and come to love America as it deserves to be loved. Obviously, we don't teach the Scripture the way that they may have started back in public education. And we've done, as I mentioned in the last couple episodes, a terrible job in teaching history and civics. I want to point out that I know a lot of history and civics teachers, and they're great, magnificent, hardworking. They love it. They love their students. They try so hard, but the system is broken. It's set up to fail. But if we had the American Freedom Curriculum, where you circle back and you keep spiraling up with better depth and more sophistication, the kids, when they graduate, will be our strongest advocates for our freedoms and liberty. And that's what public education should be about. And private education and homeschool education. That's what we should do. Until next time. Oh, and so the question in the title is, can the American Freedom Curriculum save the country? I think it can. It can save the Republic if we were to do that today. And in fact, when I proposed this back in 2007, if we had implemented it, we would have had a whole generation of kids by now that really have a fundamentally better understanding of our freedoms and liberties than the general public, and we would be so much better off. Time is wasting. We need to do something. Our country is at risk. Until tomorrow, don't forget about America's Survival Guide at americasurvivalguide.com, Patriot Week at patriotweek.org, and the Patriot Lessons American History and Civics podcast. Subscribe, like, and share. God bless you, and God bless America.